Support for the Dice Tower comes from listeners like you. Thanks for your support. The Dice Tower, episode 750.
The end.
Welcome to the Dice Tower, a podcast about board games and card games, and especially the people who play them. On today's show, Geoff reminds us that more dice often means less luck. We present an epic tale of board gaming horror. We hear from listeners around the world and answer a few more questions from the mailbag. And finally, we wrap things up by revisiting our top 10 games of all time. I'm Eric Summerer, and here's your host, the Tom to my Eric, Tom Vassell.
Well, I looked this one up, Eric, and I'm really struggling with it.
Are you? I mean, it's obscure. I'll give you that, but I thought it was appropriate.
Actually, I'm gonna Google Tom and Eric right now and see if something else comes up. No, apparently there's a Tim and Eric came up.
Oh, like the awesome show, Great Job. That would be Tim and Eric.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like, do you mean Tim and Eric? Like, I do not mean Tim and Eric.
No.
I'm gonna put a minus Tim in here. No, it still brings up Tim and Eric. It's
very insistent that you really mean Tim and Eric. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad we made a mark on society.
It's good after all these years. Like, I like to say we live in a very small pond, Tom. And when you step outside that pond.
I had a little girl ask me this past week, "Are you famous?" I was like, "Only right in this room."
Yes.
Yeah, so this is it, folks, the final podcast, and I gotta say a couple things about that. One, I can't speak for obviously everyone else involved in the Dice Tower podcast, but I have not once since I announced this 10 episodes ago felt any waverings on the subject. I felt pretty like I haven't sit there and go, "Oh, I made a terrible mistake." I have not felt that way. I felt pretty confident, and I've really enjoyed the different folks who have emailed, and even the folks who told me I was making a humongous mistake. And I appreciate that. In fact, I just an hour before we recorded this, got a very long letter that basically said, "Get off my lawn. YouTube videos are for people with no attention span." So
okay. All right.
But you know what? I don't mind that. That means people liked the show.
Sure.
Right?
I guess I'll take that.
I appreciate that. By the way, it would be way worse if we were like, "We're ending," and then cricket sound effect.
That's true. Yes. Or if it was like, "Finally."
Yeah, that's true. Or a round
last.
of applause.
About time.
So that's one thing. And the other thing is, I'm also really thankful that we did the 10 episode thing. I like that lead in. We're not like pulling the rug out from underneath the people's feet. And it's allowed us to have previous co-hosts on the show, give everyone a chance to do their thing.
Yeah. And come to terms with it too. I mean, it's not really a surprise anymore. We've all been able to sort of process that and let people react and find out about it. You'd hate to have a bunch of people later on going, "Wait, why hasn't my feed updated in the last couple of months? Wait, it's over?" So hopefully everyone knows by now.
Also, you all owe me some thanks for not taking audio from our Dice Tower cruise and making that a final episode, since we always got complaints about that.
But we did have a really nice show. We both have just gotten back from the Dice Tower cruise. Just this morning, less than 24 hours ago, I was in Florida and took the family.
That's
but we had
right.
a lovely final show. We did a game show in the Aqua Theater on the ship, which was impressive. But I think the water would have messed with the recording equipment. You would have had not a good outcome if that was our final podcast.
Well, on that note, Eric, we actually did manage to get video footage of that.
Ooh.
And are going to put it up on YouTube.
Oh, that's cool. That should be fun. Yeah, check it out. It was a really good game show.
Roy was in the main box and was able to get a copy of the footage of the show there.
Oh, that is
so
awesome.
So that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
So we just came back from the cruise, and it's interesting to me as we do this, because this is the year. I tell people, this is the 20th anniversary here. Now, it's not technically the 20th anniversary of the Dice Tower, because the Dice Tower name came around in 2005.
Right.
But in 2002 is when I wrote my first review.
Okay.
Which was really the Dice Tower. That's where it started from. The reason people listened to the Dice Tower at the beginning was because I had already been writing reviews.
Sure.
And so 20 years of that, 750 episodes, and I'm cool. I wanted to do this episode. I didn't want to have a big slam celebrity-filled thing. And in fact, Eric, I was pretty happy because in a little bit, we're going to listen to a bunch of people who sent in audio clips for us to put on the show.
Yeah.
And I don't think any of them would be considered a board game celebrity. Like, maybe, there's one podcaster who sent something in. But like,
sure.
we don't have a bunch of designers and publishers and other content creators who have, told us congratulations and things like that. So, it's not like they don't care about us. But I like the fact that I've always thought it was cool that I felt like we were always a show of just ordinary folks. Like all the people on this cruise. This wasn't a cruise of just a bunch of designers and publishers getting together. In fact, there was, I think, 2 publishers on the cruise. Maybe 3. 3 publishers on the cruise.
Yeah.
The rest was just folks who were fans of the Dice Tower.
Sure.
And I like that. They're family. I like the family feel of it. And your family, even if I've never met you, or I've met you 6 times and still can't remember your name. Which is bad on me. I'm trying.
Well, I think that's the case with a lot of the Dice Tower events. Many people arrive not knowing many people, and by the time you leave, you have new friends. My kids met some new friends on the cruise this time, and every one of our friendly conventions has been that sort of mingling atmosphere. I think, anyway.
So we're recording this in between Dice Tower Cruise and Dice Tower West, which somehow, through just fate, essentially, we're a week apart. So yes, there's a week in between, but I drove from the cruise directly to the studio and started working instantly.
Yeah.
I took today off, except I'm recording the podcast today. So yeah, it's going to be a very busy week, but you know what? I'm okay with that. I'm okay that I'm also glad that we're ending 750 here where things are starting to get back to normal.
We're getting there.
This was not ended though because of the coronavirus. Hopefully we were with you through the coronavirus, through a lot of things because It's been many years.
Yes.
But as Eric said, we just did come back from the cruise, and a lot of game playing happened on the cruise. Now,
I definitely played more than you did, I think.
For 2 reasons. One, I have to run around the ship the entire time to make sure everyone's having a good time. That's my job as host, and I enjoy doing it, but it does make you play fewer games. 2, it's possible that I taught 10 plus games of Arc Nova.
I think so. Arc Nova was set up in the conference room the entire event, and every time I came into the conference room, it had a full table, and somebody was playing it, often with Tom teaching. I
just love teaching that game.
Very popular.
Yeah, so I by the time you hear this, folks, I will probably have compiled the information. I have not. This is the first time we've used the library system in a couple years. So I don't know what games were the most popular. Obviously, Arc Nova was very popular because it was on a hot games table. But I have some suspicions about different games that were popular. But we saw all kinds of games getting played. Any notable standouts for you, Eric?
As far as things that I saw being played, I think...
Yeah, or played or whatever.
Well, one of my goals in getting access to the Dice Tower library is to play a game that I don't normally get to play. And my wife came with a list of things she wanted to try. And she had heard about this cooperative game called Rescue Polar Bears. It was published, or at least brought over to North America by Mayday Games, but it was originally, let's see, what's the 2+ Games is the name of the company. And it's even a reworking of another Rescue Polar Bears game. This is Rescue Polar Bears Time and Temperature. It's about 5 years old. It's a cooperative game where you are trying to rescue polar bears from ice flows that are continually sinking and collect enough data you need to collect 20 data tokens, and that will, I guess, convince everybody that this is a problem. That's the goal. And you're all in little boats, and the boats have special powers, and you're moving around and trying to move the polar bears. You have capacity. You only have like 1 or 2 slots in your boat to carry these bears around. And then every time your turn ends, the bears breed or grow up, or the temperature goes up, and it's always going to go up. And when it crosses a certain point, an ice flow is going to sink and the polar bears flee, and if they can't go anywhere, then they sink into the ocean. You have to rescue them with helicopters, and if you run out of helicopters, you lose, which happened to us, I think, 4 times. It's a really hard game, and I think almost too hard. It's die rolls that are determining where the polar bears spawn and how far the temperature goes up each round. And if you get really bad die rolls constantly, there's just no way to win. We did win once, and then we found out we played it wrong and that we were making the polar bears grow up wrong. We were trying to avoid breeding pairs so they wouldn't have babies, but you have to create breeding pairs if you can, and that's annoying. Anyway, the polar bears are adorable. It's a lovely produced game. It looks great on the table. It's incredibly difficult, but my wife now loves it, and now I have to hunt down a copy. Rescue Polar Bears.
I was busy teaching classics. I got kind of a kick out of the fact that some people, they wanted to play Dominion. So they went and opened up the box of Dominion, and it was like box 1 of 2. And they saw this giant other box with every Dominion card in it, right? And so they're like,
sure.
And I saw them putting it back, and I was like, no, I could teach that. And they're like, oh, it's just too much. I said, no. I have another copy that's just Dominion. I have the Dominion 2nd edition copy in the library.
Okay.
So I pulled that out, put out the basic cards. I started explaining it, and I kept having to stop because they're like, oh, that's like Clank. Oh, that's like... And they played like every other deck builder.
Sure.
I was like, well, this is the OG here.
This is going to seem pretty straightforward to you.
Yeah, but they really liked it. I just thought that was an amusing teach for me, because to see things come backwards like that.
Yeah.
That happened to me in the studio only a couple weeks ago where I taught El Grande. And people were like, oh, yeah, it's like a lot of other area control games. Yes. They came from it. And so, I don't know. I liked teaching that. I also taught Race for the Galaxy to some folks. And just, I don't know. There's just something about these strong classic games that really work for me.
Yeah, I pulled out a classic with my son, one of the 10 game series. We did 10 Days in the USA, which he had never played any of. And he said he didn't enjoy it very much, but when it was over the first time, he wanted to play it again. So that's usually a good sign. I think he really did enjoy that one. I had never played America. I played Europe before. But a lovely classic of geography and tile drafting to try and create a sequence of destinations through planes and cars and just walking across the borders. And it was fun to sort of plan your route and, steal somebody else's thing that they really wanted, or covering up the thing that they want. There's some really cool, simple, but really effective mechanisms in the 10 Days series. But one of the things that's really great about the library is that you've got some brand new stuff, some of which is very difficult to find anywhere. And this was another super popular game that a lot of people were pulling off the shelf, and I happened to swing by while they were looking for a 4th player for Comic Hunters. This is a comic-themed drafting game where you're trying to manage your comic collection. It's produced by a company called Bucaneros Jogos. They are, I believe, a Portuguese or Brazilian company. I'm not. The game is in Portuguese. I'm not sure whether they are based in Brazil or Portugal. The designer is Robert Coelho. It's comics. Each card in the game is some issue of Marvel Comics. You've got all the folks you recognize, Black Panther, Thor, Captain America, Spider-Man. They're all in there. And at the beginning of the game, they have like a hotness or a trending rating. So maybe one or two of them is going to be really popular. And then there's sort of middle grade. And then there's heroes that are cool, but not as cool as the other heroes. And different styles of issues. So maybe like a versus or a first edition, first appearance of a particular character. Those are going to be worth things. So you know that you're collecting various combinations of these comics that feature heroes, that feature certain situations. And then you acquire them through multiple different drafting rounds. There's one that's just a simple Seven Wonders style draft where you pick one and pass the rest to your neighbor. Then there's a Coloredo style draft where you have a row of cards. You either add to a row by drawing a card and add it to a row, or you take one of the rows, but that's all you get for that round. There's a really cool convention draft where you create a grid and then you can slide cards around and take rows with matching symbols. Really cool drafting mechanism. And once you're done drafting for a particular phase, you then have to play them. So not only do you have to get the symbols you want, but you have to be able to afford them by spending other cards. So sometimes you get garbage comics that you don't want to pay for the ones that you do to put down in your collection, which will score you points. And then those cards that you use to buy, to pay for their collection you put down, go back into the market to show up in future conventions, which is just brilliant. It's really neat. I tend to not like drafting games along these lines, but that extra economy of having to pay for what you're building is really cool. And the different styles of drafting. As far as I know, there is no way to get this in the US at the moment, but they did say on Board Game Geek that they're working on an international version. So fingers crossed that comic hunters in the next few months to a year or so will see a release in North America, because it was a lot of fun.
I do like this one a lot, and I would like to see this one get reprinted. One of the games that I thought was interesting that Eric brought with him, of course. Well, you know what? We'll talk about that later on in the show. Never mind. I'm getting ahead of myself. Sorry.
Okay.
I had an interesting story I was going to tell, but then realized we'll talk about this later in the show. We did play one game together. Did we play only one game together?
Was this the only one? It may have been.
Possible.
You were very busy.
So this is called Rodney Smith is a Psycho.
It is not.
It is not. Before we go any farther, I like Rodney Smith a lot. But this game, it's called Voices in My Head. Mm-hmm. And it's from Corey Kineska and Unexpected Games. And I believe it wasn't too long ago you talked about their last game, I think.
I did. Well, their last game was The Initiative.
Right.
From Unexpected Games. And I really liked that one. This is the follow-up, the next one. It's about a guy who has committed a crime. He's robbed a bank.
He's definitely committed the crime.
He did. He is guilty. But you are determining what he does on the stand. You play different personality traits. So there's like selfishness, and there's coming clean, and there's just different aspects of someone's personality, and they have different goals. And you are battling for control of his motor functions and speech functions. There's 5 different styles of his person that you are battling for control of in sort of an area control aspect. And whoever is in control of a particular aspect will get to respond to cards played by a prosecutor. So this is a one versus many game, kind of. I guess there's one role versus...
It's really not a one versus many game because it's everyone versus each other.
It's
true. But the one person who is the lawyer kind of moderates the game. They kind of set it into control, and they know there's at least one person who's kind of on their side. Someone who's like, yes, I'm guilty, please. So they're trying to make it so that person wins, because then that means you'll likely also win too. The reason I mentioned Rodney Smith at the beginning is because the art on the cover looks very similar to Rodney Smith from Watch It Played Games, and he has also publicly stated this too. So this is not...
Yes.
I'm not the only person who thinks this.
that has noticed this resemblance. No. So the prosecutor player will play.
His name is actually Guy.
Yes, that is the guy. His name is Guy. The prosecutor player plays a card that says, well, this round, whoever's in charge of speech and whoever's in charge of motor function is going to get to do something. And then the other players get around, and actually the prosecutor does too. They get to play these little discs, these influence discs, that you push onto little platforms, and the platforms represent those different aspects of his personality. And as long as your disc is still on the platform, you have influence points toward that thing. But these discs can push each other off, kind of like Kabuto Sumo, if you've played that game, or one of those coin push games in the arcade. And if you get pushed off, then you no longer have that influence disc for that particular aspect. And once everyone has played one of their discs, then you look at who is ruling speech and motor function, and they get to take certain actions. You are ultimately influencing jurors that are at the top of the board, and you're trying to get guilty or innocent or undecided verdicts and completing your particular victory condition. So it's a lot of bluffing and hidden actions and area control. It's a lot going on, and a little bit of dexterity, not a lot of dexterity, to keep your discs on the board. It's an odd game, for sure.
But I really like it. And I think part of me liking it is the theme.
Okay.
I think that the cards are funny. Like, you might give a card where you hold up the gloves, and something like this will be like holding up the gloves, and the prosecutor's like, are these your gloves? And you can say, no, they're not mine, or, hey, where'd you find my gloves?
Yeah.
And I don't know. It cracks me up because the guy on the stand is apparently not the brightest criminal in existence.
He's not.
And you only use a few cards per game. It's wonky. It's not a game. Like, if you go in this game like, I must win, I would be very hesitant to play this.
Yeah. But you don't have a ton of control. But yes, I really like the situations, the stories that you're reading, and the action cards are a lot of fun. This is a very humorous game. I did see the title itself puts me a little on edge, and I've seen other folks commenting on it, that voices in my head can lead down different paths as far as mental stability. And there are people who actually have real issues like this, and this is not meant to make fun of that. It's more like the old cartoons with the angel and the devil trying to influence somebody, or like Inside Out. It's more the internal monologue is the voices in your head, and not leading towards some sort of disorder, which could be interpreted
I would look at this
that way.
more as a parts of your conscience. Like, it's your conscience fighting against. I mean, they're actually called that. Like, one's just called selfishness.
Yes.
And that's the person who's trying to get off the hook. You're going to lie no matter what.
Yeah.
I don't know how this is going to be received. I have to say, Unexpected Games is doing something nobody else is doing.
This is certainly unique.
Are.
Yeah.
And I think the best comparison I could compare them to would be what Hub Games was trying for a moment. Do you remember the Life and Death of Billy Kerr?
Yeah.
Except Hub Games took it very seriously. Unexpected Games is not, and I think that's probably the better approach. Because, well, I don't know. I know there's a lot of people who like the initiative, and I suspect many of those same people like Voice in My Head, but I think there's also a different crowd. I don't know. I just had a lot of fun with it.
I will say that both of these first two games are different. They're unlike anything else. I think Billy Kerr is a very different game. That was they were aiming for something different than what Voices in My Head is aiming for. But they were both doing something that wasn't already on the table. So I have to applaud both companies for that. Last one I wanted to mention is one that I never got a chance to play until the cruise, and that's a little Reiner Knizia card game that made the shortlist for the Spiel des Jahres a couple years ago, called L.L.A.M.A, which I played it online on Board Game Arena in a turn-based situation and thought it was just totally, I did not get it at all. Llama is an Uno-like card game. You're trying to get rid of your cards and you're playing to a single stack in the center. When you play, there's only the numbers 1 through 6 and you have Llama cards as well. And you can play either the number that's already out there. So if a 3 is there, you can play another 3. Or you can play the next number in sequence, so a 4. When you reach 6,
Uno.
which
Uno exists, just letting everyone know.
There is Uno, yes. And then when you get to a 6, you can play a llama, and then you can play a 1 on a llama, so the llama loops things around. So it plays very quickly, and that was sort of the dumb aspect. It just seemed very straightforward. I think the twist is the scoring, because you have the ability to just simply stop playing. You can just pass. If you think your hand isn't going to get any better and you don't have good play opportunities, you can pass because you don't think it's going to cost too many points. If somebody runs out or everybody passes, you look at what you have in your hand. Those llamas are really expensive. They're 10 points. And then the other cards are the number on the card. But if you have multiples, then it only counts as 1 card. So if I have 4 3s, it only costs 3 points to have those cards in my hand. And so sometimes you can arrange or get or hold on to a better hand that isn't going to score you too many points, get out of the way rather than taking the risk of getting more llamas into your hand. Also, if you do go out, you get rid of one of your scoring chips, and the chips come in 1s and 10s. So it's possible to get a 10 chip that then can go away if you go out, which means everybody's still sort of in it until the end. You play to 40 points, and then whoever has the fewest when someone goes out wins the game. It's still very, very light and very much family weight game. This is not a deep strategy game at all. It's what we used to call a beer and pretzels style game. It's the sort of thing you can do while you're doing something else, while doing silly voices and pretending to be the count. And in that sense, I liked it. In a real-time, face-to-face aspect, I enjoyed it. My kids liked it. My wife liked it. And for that purpose, it works. Online, turn-based, I just don't see the point. This is meant to go real fast, play quickly, make llama noises. So I did enjoy Llama in person.
Making llama noises, yes. I did order, I know I'm going to hate it, but I got it anyway. I just ordered Uno All Wilds Edition.
Wait, I'm sorry, what?
I'm not kidding. So I found out about this because Eric Martin posted about it on Board Game Geek. But there is an Uno Wilds Edition. So it's called Uno All Wild. Every card is wild, but some have skips and +2 in reverse on them.
Okay. And this is a game. Maybe there's a game in there.
Kids. I'm going to play with my kids, and I'm hoping that they will then stand in unison and shout, "We hate this," and all other copies of Uno. That's my goal. I'm trying to poison the well.
Yeah, my youngest likes Uno quite a bit now. He plays it with his friends at school. So I wouldn't mind having that result, but I'm not sure it would work. You know, it's like what's the line that Syndrome from The Incredibles says? If everybody has superpowers, no one will.
That's right.
If all the cards are wild, then none of them will be.
That's right. I don't know. I must be missing something. I shall look. Anyway, we had a fantastic cruise. We're really thankful for each and every one of you who came on it. And I'll tell you what, I think it went well since we sold like 200 more rooms already for the next cruise.
Exciting. Well, yeah, and if you missed out this time, I'm sure we'll have a lovely time in 2023. Woo!
Let's stop talking about the years and let's talk about being random.
3, 2, 1,
go. It's time for GameTek with Geoff Engelstein, where we find out how games really work.
For this, the last GameTek on the Dice Tower, I am revisiting the very first segment I wrote and recorded 15 years ago. So when I came up with the idea for GameTek, This was a subject that immediately leapt to my mind. It's one of my favorite counterintuitive facts about one of my favorite topics, and one that I kept coming back to over the years: randomness in games. Now, I cut my high school and college gaming years on complex war games, true tests of skill, and yet they always included a healthy dose of randomizers, with dice resolving just about every combat. And through those years, I developed a nuanced appreciation for the role of randomization in intricate simulations, and when it worked and when it didn't. And the counterintuitive thing about randomness is that the way to lessen the impact of randomness in a game is not to reduce the number of random activities, it's to increase them. The more dice rolls a game has, the less random it is. The distribution of results from rolling dice, flipping coins, or spinning a spinner is the familiar bell curve. But there is a key parameter of that curve, the standard deviation, which defines how narrow the peak is, how spiky it looks, basically. If I make a graph of the possible outcomes from rolling 2d6 and another graph from rolling 20d6, the 20d6 chart will have a much thinner and narrower peak at the average value of 70 when compared to the 2d6 value of 7. So in a game, if you only have a few die rolls, or if there are only a few die rolls that really matter, luck will play a big role in the outcome. But if I have 100 die rolls over the course of the game, all roughly as important, then it is much more a test of skill than luck, even though way more dice are being rolled. Now, this fundamental fact of probability has tremendous consequences for our society, planet, and universe as a whole. First, it is the basis of many businesses. Casinos, for example. Casinos understand that while one person may have a very up and down experience during their visit, when you average everyone who is there, the amount the casino makes is very, very predictable. And this is also one of the reasons why they limit the sizes of bets. If someone makes a bet that far outweighs all the other bets, the casino's risk of a single big loss increases dramatically. And if you want to have the best chance to win at a casino, although it's not much fun, just put all your money on red or black at the roulette table. One big bet is the way to go. Making many small bets will make you much more susceptible and most likely just get the average loss of whatever game you're playing. Now, the insurance business plays a similar game. Individuals may gain or lose on insurance, but the companies that provide them rely on insuring many, many people to average things out. Now, on a global level, the science of climate change is also an example. The weather next week is difficult to predict, but the average temperature across the globe actually varies very little from year to year. Climate is way more predictable than weather. This is why I and many others get so annoyed when, for example, it snows in April here in New Jersey and someone says, well, I guess there's no global warming then. You can't just pull one die roll out of 100 and say that's representative of the whole thing. You need to look at large samples. Now, the math of randomness, that lots of random things happening are incredibly predictable, also explains the universe as a whole. Quantum mechanics says that an individual particle can do crazy things. It can jump through walls, create and destroy companion particles, and rapidly increase and lose energy for no reason. And yet, we don't see any of that in our world, which makes the quantum world so incredibly bizarre and difficult to intuitively understand. But the connection between the really, really tiny and the world of our common sense is bridged by this probability of large numbers. Yeah, I have no idea what one particle is going to do, but I know incredibly precisely what a trillion particles would do in this chair that I'm sitting on right now. They will remain in the shape of a chair and stop me from falling to the floor. And this idea that things that don't make sense can actually make sense has been the driving force behind GameTek all these years. If there's a worldview that underpins all 15 years of these segments, it's that if you don't understand something, reading up on the topic, talking to people that know more than you do, and connecting it to other things that you do know will more often than not lead you to a deeper understanding and appreciation of the universe and of ourselves. It has been a great honor and privilege to bring you these GameTek segments here on the Dice Tower for the last 15 years, and also probably the most fun and rewarding thing that I've ever done. Thanks to all of you for listening and for your always thoughtful feedback. This is Geoff Engelstein with GameTek.
I just wanted to stop here. I'm gonna say some thanks later on in the episode, but I did want to say thanks to Geoff. We really appreciate it, and I know we said thanks when he came on a few episodes ago to co-host. But he's probably the longest fixture on the Dice Tower other than Eric.
He beats me because he started on the show before I was on the show. I mean, I was doing production because he did a couple of episodes and then I did an intro for him. But it was before I was...
No. You did your 72 seconds before him.
Okay.
Well, okay, whatever. It doesn't matter. This isn't a contest. I love you all equally.
Okay. Sure, Dad.
But no, my biggest memory of Geoff, I think, was his talking about his 49th birthday.
Oh, at the Gen Con show. Yep.
Yeah, I remember that. Or maybe him and his kids singing Schoolhouse Rock in very quality voices at our first live music show. Yep. Now, it's been good to see Geoff getting involved in industry and designing games and sticking with us to the end.
Sure.
To the point that when we decided to change the show and drop most of the contributors, not for any negative thing, we were just moving a lot of stuff like that to the video channel, we kept Geoff because he was such a fixture of the show.
Yeah. And that last segment is one that has always stuck with me. The bucket of dice concept actually being less random than just a single die roll. You think more dice, more random, that's not necessarily the case. And that's one of his lessons. Not every lesson has stuck with me, but that particular one has.
That's because you don't understand all the lessons.
I never said that, but that doesn't mean it isn't true.
It's true for me. All righty, well, thank you, Geoff. And because Eric doesn't listen to all Geoff's lessons, we will now punish him.
And now, another tale of board gaming horror.
Oh my, that's horrific.
Gather round, children. I work at a residential treatment facility. The purpose of the facility is to provide mental health care to the clients, who are kids from ages 5 to 14 and live there 24 hours a day and 7 days a week with staff to provide the care. The range of the mental health concerns include being on the autism spectrum, having to learn differently, but the children mostly having behavioral issues based on traumatic experiences. The work at the facility comprises providing individual therapy, family therapy, group therapy, running various activities, and taking kids out on trips. While working at the facility, I have had success with playing board games with the kids while talking about what is bothering them. For kids around 8 to 10 years of age, I have had success with a game like For Sale or Sushi Go. For the kids that were more creatively gifted, I've had success with Dixit or Apples to Apples. The success was good enough that board game time was officially added to the client's weekly activity calendar. At one point, there was a set of kids in the facility which I thought was perfect for even better board game time. It was a set of 3 kids who were smart, ages 12 to 14, and loved playing games. While talking with the kids, I had learned that the 3 of them recently learned how to play Yahtzee while in school during one of their break times. I felt like the king of the world when I produced the idea to play King of Tokyo with the 3 kids. The first game was slow. It took them a while to learn the rules and apply what they knew about playing Yahtzee to a game like King of Tokyo. However, they were excited to see the chunky dice, the cool player boards with the life and points dial, the colorful deck of cards with all the powers, the awesome player pieces, the nice cardboard tokens, and even the small green cubes were great for sensory gratification. The second game we played was where the atmosphere completely changed. I have had close calls with my previous board game times with kids that really hated to lose and reacted as such, but made it through. However, for kids who just arrived for treatment, I was not prepared for their highly competitive nature or low frustration tolerance for losing. All 3 kids got very heated while playing, with trash talk thrown about, but it was mostly for having a fun time. I was very wrong about one of the kids playing. During the game, he was quiet, but it felt as something was stewing below the surface. Once the game ended, with the quiet one in last place, things went very awry. The kids helped clean up everything except for the quiet one. I went out of the room for a little while to help with other kids. I came back to the room to see the quiet kid throwing things around the room. The pieces, the game board, the box, etc. The other kids were stunned and shocked, and so was I. What finally broke me out of my stunned state was seeing the quiet kid grab the character standees and crush them in his hands, causing all sorts of creases and folds in them. Just as I was able to react and try to grab the pieces out of his way, he grabs the player boards with the health and point dials and gives them a big fold right down the middle, and I thought I heard cardboard snap. I finally was able to bring my game to a safe location away from the source of its destruction. After the carnage was over, I sadly gathered all the pieces I could find that were still strewn about the room. Even though I was able to recover most of the parts, the damage done to the standees and the player boards was still irreparable. I did end up buying another copy of King of Tokyo, but I still have the damaged original to remind myself to be careful in the future. You would think I should have learned my lesson from the last time with the same kids, but I am a glutton for punishment, and I am extremely optimistic about the potential for kids to grow and mature. So wait, there's more! The second and related story happened about 3 months after the original disaster. The clients here usually continue treatment for about 4 to 6 months, and despite remembering that the quiet kid from last time destroyed my game, I became incredibly involved with his treatment and was able to accept that outbursts can happen, and the game was collateral damage. While collaborating with him in treatment, I was able to see him improve his ability to manage frustration during those 3 months leading to the next tale of horror, so I was lulled into a false sense of security. I had overcome my fear response when thinking about bringing hobby board games back to the facility. I thought that history cannot possibly repeat itself, and I had seen the original destroyer of my board games improve during treatment, so I finally gave it another shot. The 3 kids were still in the same group. They still liked interacting with me, and they still liked gaming. I rarely had a group of players that could stay consistent week in and week out, and since the kids were still living in the facility, they would be a consistent group. I was optimistic again and decided to try a legacy game with them, particularly Machi Koro Legacy. Unfortunately, this next event added a second layer to my legacy of games being the victim of circumstance. The first game of Machi Koro Legacy was great. My assumption that the one child who had ruined my game last time improved in his temperament had proven correct after spending time with him in treatment. They picked up on the rules very quickly. There was a bit of good-natured moaning about another player buying what another player wanted. There was a bit of trash talk and some hooting and hollering when a roll on the dice was exactly what a player needed at the exact time. Before moving on to the second game, I briefly explained to the kids what a legacy game was, and they seemed to understand, and we were excited for the next game and the new things that would happen. The kids and I finished the second game without a hitch, and there seemed to be no sign of a disaster coming, even with the quiet one from the last game ending up not doing well. Unfortunately, the time was up, and all of the kids, including the quiet one from last time, helped clean up the game, and we all excitedly talked about the next time we could continue. I left the game in the room that we were using and promptly did other activities with the kids in my group. As it happens, in a mental health facility, other kids were struggling, so I went to help them out as well. This happened for quite a while, and I got really busy with the work. I got so busy that I ended up finishing my shift, leaving, and completely forgetting that I left the game in the room earlier in the day. When I arrived at work the next day and it came to the scheduled board game activity time, I realized that I had left the game at the facility the day prior. I started to panic because I knew that some of the residents are destructive due to their trauma and current mental health status, and was worried that Machi Koro Legacy would be destroyed. I breathed a temporary sigh of relief when I saw one of the kids that I played with yesterday holding the box. He ran up to me and said, "I saw that you left this, so I grabbed it to keep it safe from the other residents." I was really relieved when I heard that because he knew that I liked making sure my games were okay, but I was about to be very badly surprised. Unbeknownst to me, the 3 kids had tried to play the game the night I left it at the facility because my blood ran cold when I opened the box to play with the kids. All the cards were unwrapped and shuffled together. All the boxes were opened and pieces were in one pile, and there were stickers in places where they should not be. I asked them what happened, and they confirmed my darkest suspicions. They were so excited about the game that they forgot about the legacy part of it and me telling them that we would get to everything as we played, and they went ahead and mixed everything up anyway. Worst of all, as of now, I did not try to put everything back and reorder the cards because it is a lose-lose situation. If I do not reorganize everything, the game is not going to be played the way it should be. If I do reorganize everything, I would spoil myself too much and will lose the mystery and surprise factor of the game, which is important for legacy games. So once again, a game of mine was destroyed, but at least not as bad as last time, maybe.
Well,
I think this is a better method of destruction, because it meant they were excited about the game. Can you really blame them? It's really excited.
the legacy one hurts.
A little bit.
A little bit.
I mean...
You know what it reminds me of is, like, you ever get one of those sticker books that has, like, a gazillion stickers in it? And someone just took them all and slammed them in the book?
like you're...
Like half of them?
Yeah, and you're like, you wanted to position them all into nice tableaus and make sure that the correct scene elements went on the correct page, and instead somebody just took all stickers and stuck on one page.
I had a sticker book when I was a kid. I collected stickers.
All stickers, done.
But I didn't do the ones I didn't do, even as a kid I thought they were dumb, were the ones that came in like collectible card packs.
Okay.
Where you'd buy a pack, it would be a book full of stickers, and then you would buy packs of stickers to put them into different slots. And then you would trade stickers with other people. Yes. Like cards.
Okay.
I don't know how I got onto this, so don't mess with people's games. Also, I decided to make Eric read the longest tale of horror ever for our last episode.
That was, yes. I mean, kudos to the person who has been doing this, that has put their games in the line of fire to help these kids. Ultimately, that's great. That's not horrific at all. That's amazement. Huzzah! I'm going to put in a huzzah. Huzzah to you.
Huzzah. All right, well, I guess we'll jump to questions.
Sure.
Questions.
Okay, well, these aren't necessarily questions per se, but they're different folks who, like I said, they send in audio clips. So we have a bunch of them here, and so we're going to listen to them, and we'll pause every once in a while and talk. So let's get started with the first one.
Hi there, Dice Tower and all the listeners. This is Jani from Mitä Pelataan podcast and also other media. I wanted to say thank you to the Dice Tower, specifically Tom, but others also, for entertaining us all with the podcast for so many years. I originally found the Dice Tower from YouTube, and the videos, especially the top 10 lists, were really interesting to me in the part of my hobby where everything began to escalate, meaning that I wanted to buy and try all the games that I could see that other people likes. Luckily, I repeat, luckily, I'm past that stage and I know better, but many people go through that, and Dice Tower is probably the best media there is for that, everything combined. When I went to a trip on 2015, I wanted to download some podcasts and try how to listen to them because I was bored with listening to books on my phone. And I knew that there will be lots of sitting and not doing anything, so I thought, why not listen to board game podcasts? And of course, I started with the Dice Tower podcast because I was already familiar with the videos. I very clearly remember listening to the 400th episode with all the guests while I was sitting on the bus on the way to Alhambra in Spain. And that was a moment I noticed that podcasts are the media for me. And since then I've been listening to so many podcasts, and my main source in the beginning was Dice Tower Network. So also thank you for having the Dice Tower Network, and I hope you keep it running even if this flagship show is going to end. But I'm sure that the one you will come up with will be wonderful, especially if Eric is in charge of planning it. I've had the privilege to meet some of you in Europe, and I've had the privilege of having some of you as guests in my podcast show. And thank you for that also. It's been 350 episodes soon, and I hope there are many more to come with the new format and the new show. I don't like the show ending, but, you know, it might become something better. There have been changes in the show earlier already that I might not have liked, but I've got used to them and all of them were good at the end. So this change will be good as well. Thank you for the years and let's see many more. Have a great spring of 2022 or the moment of your life whenever you are listening to this. Bye bye.
I want to pause here real quick and say the Dice Tower Network is not going away. Even though it is a little odd in some sense of the word to have a Dice Tower Network with no Dice Tower.
Right.
Quite. I mean, we're still part of it, and we have Dice Tower News as part of the Dice Tower Now. Our news show is still part of the Dice Tower Network, and some other things in that regard. We're going to keep the Dice Tower Network around, still look for podcasts, and in fact, it's easier for me to listen and add podcasts when I'm not doing one of my own.
Right. Okay.
And like I said, I'm hoping to jump around and be on some of these podcasts. If they invite me, obviously. I'm not trying. There's not an open invitation that I'm like, I'm asking to be on people's podcasts. All right, so there you go, Yanni. And let's now hear from Daniel.
Hi, everyone at the Dice Tower. This is Daniel Brown. Thanks for years and years of great entertainment. I started listening on episode 3, and at the time it was very easy to go back and listen to all the episodes. I can't imagine doing that today. At the time, I owned a huge collection of Advanced Squad Leader, but was buying more and more games from Europe, so the podcast was perfect for me. My taste in games have changed, much as the Dice Tower podcast has changed. Tom, for 750 episodes, I've been amazed by your enthusiasm and never-ending desire to play new games. It's been a joy. I've enjoyed every host, co-host, and contributor throughout the years. It's been amazing how many people have added value and entertainment to the Dice Tower. It's been fun watching the Dice Tower make those changes over the years, and your willingness to make the changes and adjust to keep the podcast fresh and entertaining is nothing short of amazing. I will miss not seeing, or I should say hearing, the podcast and seeing it on my feeds, but I will look forward to whatever comes next. And again, I just want to say thank you for all of the great times. Generally, listening to y'all in my long commute to work and back. Thanks again.
Hello and greetings from Germany. My name is Austin. I have been a big fan of the Dice Tower since 2013 when I watched a review on Memoir 44. I then discovered your other videos and I dove into the hobby. I then brought my family into the hobby who all enjoy the great games recommended to me by you guys. I started listening to the podcast regularly about episode 450 and I have been an avid listener since. In 2020 I joined the Catholic Seminary and I downloaded the podcast to my MP3 player and listened to them during my work. I also brought games with me and taught my converts, who now also love and enjoy the great hobby of board gaming. We now have a dedicated gaming time weekly. I have loved listening to you, Tom, Eric, Mandy, and Suzanne, and have had many laughs throughout the years. Thank you again for all of your hard work and love you have put into this great podcast, which is a pillar of the board gaming media as we see it today. Many prayers for you and to all the gang at the Dice Tower. Have fun gaming.
Hi, Tom and Eric and Mandy and Suzanne. This is Kristen Smith, and I had to send a message when I heard that the Dice Tower podcast was ending. So here goes nothing. I want to say a heartfelt thank you for the years you have invested in the podcast. I didn't start listening till about 3 years ago, so I had a ton of catching up to do when I did start listening. I actually found out about the Dice Tower after watching a YouTube review of a game by Z. I then followed the links to the Dice Tower website, and the rest is history. The podcast has become such a big part of our lives here in my house. Pre-COVID, it was one of the great go-tos for what was then a longer commute to the kids' schools and to work. Now it's a great listen when we are all in the car together, going from here to there around town. As a person new to modern board gaming, It has been a great way for me to get information on older and newer games alike, and excitedly share them with friends and family. From the jokes in the introduction and the segments with Geoff, to the questions and answers, and the top 10s, and the tales of board game horror, and everything in between, it's all awesome. I love listening to the Game Pies and the Two Truths and a Lie also. I will miss listening in and waiting for the next Tuesday to come, but I understand that change is not always a bad thing, and I look forward to hearing and seeing the next installment of all of the wonderful things up to come for the Dice Tower Adventures. So thank you for growing my collection of from Monopoly to over 400 awesome games.
Hey, Tom and Eric. Thank you so much for accompanying me through some transformative years. I started listening to the Dice Tower, I think in 2013, when I was tinkering with my own board game prototype and discovering the entire scene again. In 2014, my son was born and gaming time was cut short dramatically. And you guys just helped keep this spark alive. Even though I couldn't put much time into gaming, I was listening to every episode. My son even featured once on the Dice Tower when he put my magnetic meeples behind the kitchen.
Never to see the light of day again.
No, wait, they actually did see it again, because the guy that had auctioned off these magnetic meeples, he was also a Dice Tower listener, and he sent me another set of those meeples, accompanied by a travel journal that apparently they kept while they were journeying through Middle-earth and through other game settings, and I was just awestruck at the lengths that people would go through just to bring joy to somebody else that they didn't even know. But that aside, nowadays my son is 7, my daughter's 5. They both are gamers. We recently started Stuffed Fables that you, Eric, raved about, and we had a blast. So thank you very much for accompanying me again through those times, and I'm really sad this is ending, but also looking forward to everything that's coming, especially everything that I can listen to. Stay tuned. Thanks again. Bye.
Now, there's another tale of horror that became a tale of amazement. That is so cool that Nico's story about the meeples ended up with making another connection with more meeples. Losing meeples begat more meeples, and an adventure of meeples. Huzzah! Double huzzah for this episode.
Well, I actually have to say, there's a lot of things we've done that have become standards of the Dice Tower. Obviously, the biggest thing is our top 10 lists, but also we didn't come up with the idea of top 10 lists. You know,
no,
it's been around
one or
for a
two
while.
people did it.
Sure, well, people just like lists anyway. I mean, they're all over the place. But Tales of Horror, I don't remember what brought this in my mind. It's definitely someone else whose idea I'm sure I stole. But I like the concept of it. We've been doing these for years, and there have been some pretty horrific. And then we also did a few others. We did Tales of Amazement and Tales of... We had all kinds of weird tales for a while.
Tales of Betrayal. I just like the rhyme.
Anyway, I'm just glad. Thank you, Nico. All right, let's jump to Rob.
Hey, Dice Tower crew. Congratulations on 750 episodes of the podcast. What an accomplishment. There's something about this audio-only format that is so portable, and listening to you all talk about games is so very relaxing and calming to me. Because of this, although I've only been listening for a couple of years now, your podcast has been my go-to coping mechanism during some very trying times in my life. For instance, I've had you in my ears at the emergency room, battling through COVID back in 2020, in the waiting room during my 5-year-old son's heart surgery, and busying my mind while waiting for our recent vet appointment where we had to say goodbye to a beloved family pet. Through all these trying times, the Dice Tower family has always been there for me to fall back on, even though you have no idea who I am. Now, imagine how many times you've been there for the thousands and thousands of gamers who've been listening to you for nearly 2 decades now. You all have made a positive, lasting impact on the lives of so many people, and for that, you should be extremely proud. I see this end as a joyful one, and a cause for celebration of the great work you've done over the years. Thank you for everything, and I look forward to seeing what you have in store for us next.
This is John in Utah, and I want to thank you, Tom and Eric, for years of great podcasts. I started listening around 2011, and you've been my frequent companions ever since as I drive around or do yard work. I love the tales of horror, your top 10 lists, the current information, and so much more. Tom, you even graciously invited me to one of your game nights when I was in Florida on business and reached out to you. Thank you so much for all you've done for me personally and for the hobby, and I wish you well in all your future endeavors.
John brings up a good point. If you're ever coming to the Miami area, feel free to email me at tom@dicetower.com, and I'll let you know if we have a game night. I cannot say whether or not you can come by the Dice Tower Studios. That may or may not be a possibility. Just assume it's not. It'd be like people asking you to come to your job all the time.
Right.
We actually have to get work done. But yeah, if you ever want to come, and I've met so many fans of the Dice Tower over the years at just various game nights, and I've always been happy about that.
You should schedule tours.
We should not.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I did. When I went to Sierra Online and got to tour their game-making facility, it was really cool. So I'm just saying you should do it.
Sierra Online is how much bigger than us?
They were big. They're not anything anymore, right?
Well, that's because you went and looked in their offices.
I stole their secrets.
Speaking of other podcasts, let's jump to Steve.
Hello, Mandy, Suzanne, Tom, and Eric. It's Steve from the Board Game Barbecue podcast down in Australia. And I just wanted to say thank you because I can say that I'm Steve from the Board Game Barbecue podcast because of you. A large portion of my drive in this hobby has been because of the content I received from the Dice Tower in general, but specifically the podcast. I've been listening for a few years now. Remember the first episode I listened to was an episode where you went through your favorite games of the year all together in one group podcast. I went back and listened to some older stuff, but I've listened to every episode since then, and it's just become a part of my weekly routine. So and when I decided to start a podcast here in Australia, it was very much I wanted to take a few of the things that you guys do and bring them to our podcast, namely just keeping it really positive, not being negative on the hobby or negative on games or designers. People put a lot of work into that, and a lot of that came from listening to you guys talk so glowingly about the hobby, and always talking about how every year someone says that there's games out there that this isn't a great year, and you're like, no, every year's a great year. They're always getting better, and so it's just been really refreshing, and it's going to be a hole that I need to fill in my weekly routine now, but I still got all the other content that you guys obviously do, but I just wanted to say a huge thanks specifically for the podcast, and all the best with whatever comes next. Cheers.
Thanks for taking us through the bad times. Eric and Tom, Board Gamers Bumblebee and Optimus Prime. When I heard the podcast is ending, I almost cried. I'm not angry, just grateful for your time. You made board games a big part of my life. I remember you answering my question and I was filled with pride. You did not have to answer this crazy guy. Through the audio, you made us all smile. Now it's time to look forward and roll the dice and go over to YouTube and watch you live.
Hello, Tom and Eric. My name is Jeremiah. I've been a listener since I graduated and started working, so that's around 2007. Before that, I was somewhat exposed to hobby board games from magazines and websites like RPG.net, the Games Archive, I think is one, and articles from About.com. That was okay because there wasn't any local shops here in the Philippines that sold most of these games, nor would I have been able to afford them then. But when I discovered the Dice Tower, that was also the time when I was meeting other local enthusiasts, and shops started carrying more board games. The Dice Tower was also the first podcast I listened to. It was so fun and convenient to travel to work listening to your downloadable content. And there was also enough back catalog for me to go through while I was waiting for the next new episode. It feels like your podcast became the blueprint for pushing better quality content and production on podcasts. And it also exposed me to other podcasters, then video content, And as the Dice Tower's video production increased and got better over time, I found myself going back to it more often than most other video blogs. I now understand that this transition is both natural and inevitable, and I've always thought that one time the podcast will just get absorbed into the videos. That seemed proven by Eric having a regular show with Crystal in the Dice Tower tonight, and that's awesome. I also love that the live interactions online is now so common, even for me who lives on the other side of the globe. I don't have to be at a convention to become involved. Thank you so much for years of podcasts, for continuing to develop and produce content that is always entertaining and informative. Like many other fans, the Dice Tower podcast pretty much held my hand through my journey into this hobby.
What an incredible run. I started listening to your podcast in 2010, and I've had so many enjoyable hours listening since then. I even got to attend one of your Gen Con musical live shows. A particular thank you to Geoff for all of his wonderful segments. The Dice Tower has meant a lot to me over the years. Thank you very, very much.
All righty. Well, thank you to everyone who sent those in. We have a couple more things before we go, but these are written things. And so, Eric, why don't you tell us what Christina said?
Sure. Christina said, if it were not COVID times, I would attempt to learn how to record an audio file and send it to you. But alas, I just can't make that happen right now. So here are my written sentiments as you wrap up your Dice Tower podcast. Thank you for walking, or rather talking, alongside me over the past 10 years. The Dice Tower podcast has carried me through good and bad times alike, from career shifts to medical diagnoses to new family members. Your voices have been a comforting constant. As a neurodivergent person, board gaming has provided me with a fun yet structured medium by which to socially engage with others. And while I found the hobby via my friendly local game store, it was your podcast that taught me the language of modern hobby board games. This language has enhanced my communication with other gamers and helped me to connect in meaningful ways. So, may your worker placement be wise, your engine building be efficient, your action selection be timely, and your resource gathering be plentiful. I sincerely hope that your future endeavors bring you as much joy as your podcast content has given me. Many thanks, and have fun gaming, Christina.
That's very nice. Thank you very much, Christina. Daniel asked us a couple questions. He said when he heard that we were first ending the podcast, he decided to go back and listen to the older episodes. And so a lot of things have changed. Hosts, guest segments, yada, yada, yada. My voice, he said, has changed only slightly. I think I have the same voice. My voice does not match my size. I know that. I look like I should have a voice like this. Not my muscles, but I'm just a big giant guy. I don't know how I got off on that point, but
I don't know.
Were there major pivot points in the history of the podcast that stand out to you? I mean, there's obviously the changing of hosts each time.
Sure.
And I mean, there was, the major change from Joe to Sam, from Sam to Eric, adding Mandy and Suzanne.
Yep.
Those would be the major changes, right?
Well, there was also the one around 500 when we sort of refocused. Was that when we started doing weekly? We were weekly before then. That was a transition at one point when we went away from...
We did bi-weekly.
Yeah.
And then there was a while we were recording 2 episodes together.
Yes.
And the top 10 was only in one of the 2 episodes.
Yes.
And that was fine, but that was very, very time-consuming.
It was for that one evening, yes.
Yes. It was a long recording.
And then, spreading out hosting duties as well was, a shift. And I think a good one, but it was... It took a little bit of getting used to and coordinating what we were all covering amongst the 4 of us. And that was maybe the most difficult transition, just to coordinate everything.
I recommend that you watch or listen, you don't have to watch, to the history of the Dice Tower, which is like a 4-hour video online where I talk about a lot of these things. I mean, obviously the video stuff's mixed in there too.
Yeah.
The thing that I might mention that's not just podcast is conventions. So at the very beginning of the Dice Tower, I was going to one convention a year, which was Origins.
Mm-hmm.
And we made Origins our convention in many ways. You know, we had meals with people at Origins, Dice Tower meals. You remember those, Eric?
Yes, I do. Where we just like say, let's all gather at the booth. Not even. It was gather at this particular hallway and we'll all march over to a restaurant together and have dinner. We couldn't do that after a while.
Yeah, well, I mean, the first one was like 5 people.
Right.
You know? And then the last one, we got to like 100. And I was like, all right, we need to calm down here.
Yeah.
I can't even imagine trying it now. But our convention presence changed a lot as time went by. We went from doing a show. I don't know why I've always remembered doing a particular podcast show with other podcasters, and Eric, I know you remember this too, where everyone was part of a network. It was not the Dice Tower network.
Yes, that was at the Origins. That was when we announced that I was going to be co-host.
Yes, and there was the Pulp Gaming Network, which I believe no longer exists. And we felt like some small fry podcast there, right? You know, and then we started having booths at conventions, and it became a thing.
Yeah.
We started doing shows at conventions. I don't know, that the convention thing. I remember when we switched, that was cool, and I also remember when we kind of switched, and it's kind of funny because Origins was our convention, and now it's one of the ones that we barely go to. But times change, obviously.
Right. Yeah. Schedules change. And as we would add more official conventions, as the Dice Tower events have grown, that's usually one more other event that we haven't been able to go to. Just because I have to work. And you can't spend all your time away from the studio.
For a while, we were doing the Gamma Trade Show.
Yeah.
And that's happening in a couple weeks as of us recording this. And we're not going to that straight up because we're going to Dice Tower West instead.
Right.
You know.
Yes.
Then, this has nothing to do with the last question. Daniel turns a hard right.
Yeah. Yes.
He had an experience where someone was cheating while playing a game. They were peeking during Werewolf.
What?
Or if you didn't hide your cards or dominoes in a game, he would look at your hand, and he said that's part of the game. Cheating the best is obviously the best player. He said that in his culture, cheating was a way of life and is required to succeed. And he doesn't see this person anymore, but why do we not see more instances of cheating in games? Because they're good at hiding it. And how did you handle it? Why is cheating frowned on so heavily in our current gaming culture? I would like to think that cheating is frowned on heavily in culture, period.
Sure.
Like, if I'm standing in line for a long time at a store and someone somehow cuts that line,
yeah,
that's cheating.
Because you weren't looking.
That infuriates me.
Yeah.
I don't like when people cheat on their taxes. I don't like, you know what I'm saying? I don't think cheating is frowned on in gaming because people don't tend to like cheaters in general. And yes, I know that there are some subcultures, usually it's like in a gaming group or something, where cheating is fine, but I think there are very few and far in between. And I don't often accept culture excuses for bad behavior.
Well, this goes back to Geoff has talked about the magic circle concept, and we've brought it up a few times. Lots of people have talked about it, where you have the social contract that certain behavior is acceptable and certain behavior is not. And usually when you lay out the rules of the game, the magic circle says that everyone's going to follow those rules. And if somebody's cheating, they're no longer following those rules. And if you have a magic circle that says, well, everybody can cheat, and that's part of our circle, then that's fine. But when only one or two people are working outside the circle and everyone else is trying to play within it, that's a problem because you're not playing by the same rules. That's not fair. And we're really big on fairness.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't like when people say, "Oh, well, this is the culture." No, whatever. The rudeness can transcend that. It's like when someone uses their culture as to why they're late for an event. Don't be late. Be on time. You wouldn't want Tom Vassell, the American, to go all over the world and say, well, change this because that's how I do it. That would be rude of me to do so. So, I think a lot of people are just using that as an excuse. Don't cheat. Don't cheat.
Yeah.
Boo! In episode 750 of Dice Tower, we denounce cheating. We're taking a strong and controversial stand.
Cheating.
We're taking a hard stand. I know that this is a tough one. We may be alone on it.
Putting our flag in the sand.
Vacillate. All right, finally Daniel says he's playing a game soon with Scott, Logan, Kyle, and Joe. Who should go first?
All right, you've got your answer in your head. I've got my answer in my head. At the count of 3, we should both say it.
All right, ready?
1, 2, 3. Logan.
Kyle. Well, notice neither of us said Joe. All right, sorry, Joe. You were my last pick. All righty. Well, let's get to that top 10.
It's a Dice Tower top 10.
All right. I believe the very first top 10 list on episode 1 of the Dice Tower was our top 10 games of all time. So it would only make sense.
It does make sense. And the first top 10 list I ever did was my top 10, but it was when I was just your friendly neighborhood announcer guy. I was just doing the intros and outros to the episodes. And I think every top 10 list, you had me record an intro. And now the Dice Tower presents the top 10 mudslinging games.
I wanted to be more professional and have custom intros to some degree.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't like having the same generic intro. I liked having a little bit, because I've always modeled my shows a little bit after the late night shows, even though I don't like a lot of the stuff in the late night shows, but I always like that whole, welcome to tonight's show. Tonight we have Hugh Jackman and, so-and-so. I've always liked that. But I think our top 10 games have changed tremendously. I mean, yours have changed even more so than mine.
Yep.
But for a while, I was definitely on the Duel of Ages kick.
Yep.
I believe from my original top 10 list from the beginning of the podcast, I have one game that has survived.
And I'm in the exact same situation from my list from 15 years ago. It was February 2007 that I showed up on the show with you and Sam. Only one game is a crossover.
It was not the game I expected.
Yeah, most people didn't expect it. I posted on Twitter, and yes, I saw all of you yahoos who said it was Citadels. I saw you. You're all hilarious. But not many people got with the one it actually was.
Eric, it's their final episode.
I know.
What game did they do?
They all said, Citadels!
A tear rolled down my cheek. All right, well, let's get started with our top 10 games of all time. Woo, 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 woo.
Number 10.
My number 10 is my favorite of the Tiny Epic series from Gamelin Games and Scott Alm's Tiny Epic Galaxies. I love the dice rolling, action selection, and the fact that everybody is involved. If you save up culture points, you can jump in on people's actions and get stuff done when it's not your turn. Number 10, Tiny Epic Galaxies.
My number 10 is Vindication. I don't know why I like this game so much when it's a very heavily themed game about, vindicating yourself. And at the same time, it's just a straight up Euro game. But it's a sandbox Euro game that allows you to make a lot of good choices with beautiful production. Love it. Vindication, my number 10.
Number 9.
My number 9 shows up a lot of table time with the family. That is Potion Explosion, the game with the marbles that you're trying to create combinations and have them clash into each other, get more and more resources, make your potions, use those potions to do cool stuff. It's sort of an engine concept as you get more of the potions and use them to claim more things and get that machine moving along and seeing those cool patterns, visceral components and everything. I love it. Family loves it. Potion Explosion, number 9.
When you said that Potion Explosion there in a second, I thought you were saying it shows up later in someone else's list as a heads up. No crossovers.
There is no crossover at all.
And I'm very pleased about that. And not because... No, I'm serious. Because someone mentioned this on a forum somewhere. Someone mentioned that, that there's not that many crossovers. Why is this the case? It's because I've always wanted the Dice Tower to be a show where we had different opinions.
We are very different people.
Yeah, I don't want it to... I mean, if we do like the same game a lot, that's fantastic.
Sure.
It's great, but... And also, there's quite a few Eric's... Almost every game on Eric's list is in my top 100.
Yeah.
With a couple exceptions.
Yep.
But my number 9 is Space Base, which I just did play on the Dice Tower Cruise.
I saw you playing.
Because I just love this game. I think I played it, and I taught it once. I just get a kick out of it. There's a lot of cool games that have this same idea. Machikoro and a lot of, the new one, Bad Company. But Space Base just still does it the best. Roll dice, get resources, so much fun.
Yeah, I was surprised to see this one that high up on your list. I knew you liked it, but I didn't think it had made the top 10.
Number 8.
Number 8, we mentioned earlier in the show, and that's Dominion, the granddaddy of the deck builders. I still love how pure, straightforward it is, and all those thousands of combinations you can come up with, pilling those 10 Kingdom cards. It's a lovely game. I love it. Dominion, number 8.
It's good. It almost made mine. Number 8 for me is a game I saw a lot of people playing at the retreat and many other places these days, and that's Nidavellir. This one is growing more and more. The idea, it's a little auction game where you're collecting sets of dwarves, but it's fast, it's fun, and it has unique, cool ways to score with leaders that just makes it so much fun. And the fact that your money keeps upgrading in the game. Fantastic game, Nidavellir.
It is a really cool system. It's just not in my top 10.
Number 7.
My number 7 has moved up a little bit. I've been able to play a few times recently online, and it sort of renewed my love of Through the Ages. This is probably, looking ahead, this is the heaviest game on my list. It's a deep one, so deep that it has like multiple methods of teaching it, where you sort of gradually learn how to play this game. It can get pretty complex and a little punishing if you don't pay attention, but it's so rewarding when you get something working and get those resources churning and get that exact leader that you need to fit with the strategy. There's just so much to explore in Through the Ages. It's always a rewarding experience. It's my number 7, Through the Ages.
My number 7 is Summoner Wars, still the classic from Plaid Hat Games, where your deck of cards is also the mana that you spend to deploy them. Cards on the board as creatures. This is the new 2nd edition that's out, even better than the first, which was one of my favorite games. I love it. Summoner Wars.
I haven't played the 2nd edition, but that 1st edition, I think that was that same Origins, Tom, that you talked about, that panel we were on. I think that's when we first met Colby Dowk and saw Summoner Words for the first time.
Number 6.
Number 6 is the one crossover from both lists. That used to be my number 1 game, I think. Yeah, Power Grid. The Freedom and Freeze classic about building roots, collecting resources to power your plants, upgrading those plants. There's an auction mechanism. It's a mathy game, but it also has cool root building, and I love that economy. The market of, as more people get a particular resource or need to buy a particular resource, it becomes more expensive, and switching to a different fuel for your power plants is a good idea. I just love how the whole system works together. It clicks. Power Grid, my number 6.
Great game. Very highly rated game, and so is my number 6, Gloomhaven.
People seem to like it.
You know what? I am moving to playing this only online at this point, though, because the new online, or the Steam implementation of this is unbelievably good. But who knows? When Frosthaven comes out, we'll see what happens. If it changes my mind, I'm considering it basically the same game. I know it's a sequel, but it's more Gloomhaven.
Sure.
Great dungeon crawler. It's a dungeon crawler for Euro gamers. Gloomhaven.
Number 5.
At some point, as I calculated these lists, I stopped putting or separating the multiple versions of a particular game, and that's what I did with Pandemic. So I have lumped all the Pandemics together as my number 5. That includes the legacy versions, that includes the historical versions, of which I like Rising Tide the best. I don't know if I had to choose. I think I like Legacy better than plain vanilla Pandemic, but I mean, I really like them all. They're all just delicious. My wife, I think it's still her favorite game. It just works so well. It clicks, it sings. Whether you're chasing water or chasing those diseases around the world. It's a rather unfortunate name these days, but I think its popularity is still holding strong. It's my number 5, Pandemic, all of the variants.
Huh. There's got to be one that you think is not that good.
Cthulhu.
Okay. Bad choice.
But Cthulhu doesn't drag it down enough to, knock it down. It's good.
I think you could say most of the variants anyway. Like I like Ticket to Ride's my list. I don't ever say except for Rails and Sails, whatever. All right, my number 5 is Project Elite. You just want to mow down aliens who are coming in. It's a speed game, cooperative game that is so entertaining and so fun. Every time I teach this, people just have a huge blast playing it. Tons of fun. Project Elite.
I think this is the only game in your top 10 that I haven't played, and that was certainly not the case when I started on the show. So I think I'm going to call that a win.
I think that's reasonable.
Number 4.
Number 4 is the Quacks of Quedlinburg, the push your luck potion-making game where you build your bag full of tokens and all these wacky ingredients and silly ailments in some of the more recent expansions. I love the push your luck. I love the strategy of building your bag. It's another one that's a huge hit with the family, so it sees a lot of table time. And with those enhanced geek-up bits, they make really cool clacking sounds in your bag. The Quacks of Quedlinburg, number 4.
I definitely get this one. This was played a lot, by the way, on the cruise.
Sure.
So my number 4 was also played a lot on the cruise, and that's The Crew. Now, I mean, I know there's 2 versions of The Crew. There was the Deep Space Adventures, and now there's Deep Sea, or whatever they're called.
Yes.
The new one, the Deep Sea Adventures, completely supplants the last one. Not necessarily in a bad way. It's not like the last one was bad. It just does everything that one does and more.
Sure.
And this cooperative trick-taking game just hits in all the right spots. I think we'll be talking about The Crew in 20 years, honestly.
Yeah.
A fantastic game.
It is. I don't know where it fell. I did do a full 100 ranking. The Crew is probably in the teens, if not early 20s. I love it as well. I'm a little surprised to see it this high, but I know you love it, so I guess I'm not that surprised. It's a great game. Wonderful. I play it all the time.
Number 3.
My number 3 is new to my top 10, and that's Res Arcana. It's always been in my top 100, but as I've played it more online, I've really come to really, really like the game. It's a Tom Lehman design, resource management, but you're only given 8 cards in your deck. And so you can kind of plan your strategy around those cards and which ones you want to build first, which ones you're going to toss away for resources, and how you make your system work, what goals you're going for in the center, and then it's a race to get to 10 points. It just sings. I love that puzzle of making your particular deal in Res Arcana. You can also play drafting variants where you pass the cards around, making that all work. Res Arcana, number 3.
That's pretty high. That one's really moved up for you.
Yeah, it has.
My number 3 is strong Euro-style game from Uwe Rosenberg. I love many of his games. This is the only one to hit the top 10, although others are very close in the top 20. And this is Le Havre. Le Havre, still the king for me. Still, get resources or take an action spot. So many good choices. I love it. Le Havre.
Number 2.
There's something really special when the theme of a game and its mechanisms just combine in a way that I think I've used sings a lot this episode, but it does it here too. It makes the game easier to understand. It makes it so much simpler to decide what you want to do and to feel like you're creating a narrative. And that is absolutely the case with Viticulture. What are you doing in this game? You are making wine. How do you do that? Well, you got to plant grapes, and then you got to harvest the grapes, and then you got to turn that grape juice into wine, and then you got to sell the wine. That's what you do. It's a worker placement game. You do all of these actions in various seasons. There's both the basic version and the Tuscany board, which adds more things you can do, more actions, a wider variety. But it all makes thematic sense and has this great connection where you feel like you're building a winery, a vineyard, and doing the business of all of that. It's delightful. Viticulture, my number 2.
I think this is the closest you and I are, because Dominion was 25 for me and 8 for you, so that's a difference of 17.
Okay.
But Viticulture for me was 13.
Okay.
So I'm 11 away from you. That's pretty high. I think Viticulture is solid, although I very much put in there only when played with
Tuscany.
Tuscany.
Yeah.
I still like it without Tuscany, but it's top material with Tuscany.
Sure.
My number 2 is the only game I believe that lasted over from my original. I just love it. Cosmic Encounter. Fantastic game. Mixing aliens, fighting each other, but not so much fighting, negotiating, working out deals, special abilities. Just such a lovely game. It's the oldest game on either of our lists, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it still holds up well 40-some years later.
Yeah. It's not one that has really landed for me, but the few times I've played and have enjoyed it, it's when I'm sitting at the table with you. So you add something to this game, and maybe it's just your joy shining through. But it's a lot more fun when you're at the table than when I've played it other times.
I appreciate that. I don't know what that says, but I'll take it.
And finally, number 1.
Last but not least, absolutely not least, it has not moved in some time, but you'll note it was not on my list 15 years ago because I hadn't played it yet. My number 1 game is still Merchant of Venus, the original rules. Every once in a while I get the question that somebody says, I got a copy of the Fantasy Flight version that has both sets of rules. Which one should I do? Classic, all the way. The original race to 2,000 space bucks as you fly around the galaxy, buying, selling, trading, exploring, finding a route, making it more efficient, getting real estate, and upgrading your ship so you can haul more vol silk. There's something about the way this is all presented. It's got a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek sci-fi vibe. It's an efficiency engine. It's pick up and deliver. It does all the stuff I like with just a hair of luck thrown in there. Well, maybe even more, a little bit of luck, but ways to mitigate that luck. So not every game is deterministic. There's always some unknown in there as you fly the galaxy in Merchant of Venus. My favorite game, number 1.
Yeah. You like it. I mean, that was one thing on the cruise. Someone waited for Eric for the longest time to play Merchants of Venus. Patiently waited.
He did. And I did
finally
play with
like,
him. I sat
I'm
down
going
and
to play another game. And
I showed up. 5
minutes later, Eric walked in.
Yep. But he sat down at the comic collector game, Comic Hunter, and so I played that with him, and he was perfectly fine.
All right, Eric, you said you played every game on my list except one. When did you play Arc Nova?
I got to play Arc Nova with my friends at the Portal not too long ago, but I've only played it once, and so it has not... I enjoyed it. I really did like the game. It is not at the point that I can put it into anywhere near the top 10 yet.
Oh, no. I'm not expecting you to do that. I just didn't know when you had played it.
No, I got to... I'm not on the boat.
It is my number 1. And folks, I know that it sounds like, oh, this is a brand new game shot to the top. Well, that's true. But it doesn't happen all the time. I mean, the last time a game shot to number 1, the first year it came out, was Gloomhaven. And that stayed in the top. It's only number 6 right now, still. No other game has ever hit number 1 before. And I can't explain it other than I just love everything about it. It is a full-on Euro game. Yeah, even though I still get the Tom doesn't like Euro games thing. I don't know what else I can do here. It takes a lot of mechanisms from other games, puts them with a theme that I love, building a zoo, and just is such a rollicking good time.
Yeah.
Such great choices. Every card's different, every game. And I know it's my favorite game because, again, like I said, I taught it the entire cruise and never got bored.
Well,
I get bored of teaching a game twice almost always.
I think this probably has the same, high points that we're talking about with Viticulture. The theme just, you feel like you're running a zoo. And a lot of it makes sense as you are building up your map. And I also like the action selection mechanism where you've got your card row, your 5 cards, and you're triggering one and then moving it to the end of the line, thereby making the other ones that you didn't choose more powerful. And that's a cool thing to manage. It's a cool efficiency engine, too.
Yeah, I'm curious where this one's going to end up. I suspect it's going to hit the top 10 of Board Game Geek also. I really do. Well, there you go, folks. Our top 10 games of all time. Eric, did you mention your top 10 list from the beginning?
So from 15 years ago. I mean, ones that some of these have fallen quite a bit. Number 10 was Transamerica. Number 9, Familien Banda, the game of genetic manipulation. Number 8 was Zendo. Number 7, Indonesia, the Splotter title. Number 6 was Bus, another Splotter title. Number 5, Robo Rally. Number 4, Logistico, which I just played on the cruise. Number 3, Attica. Number 2, Entdecker. And as I said, number 1 was Power Grid. So a lot has shifted around in those last 15 years for sure.
Don't worry, everyone. I had your back. I yelled at Eric about playing Logistico.
I really
Actually,
liked
though,
it.
I didn't have your back because all of you are like, what is Logistico? Don't worry about it. My top 10 from 2005, Time's Up, which I still really like. Liberte, which has fallen off into who knows where.
Yeah.
Age of Steam, which I played like many, many train games I like more. Number 7, El Grande. Still think it's great. Still my top 100. Number 6, Memoir 44, which I still really enjoy, just not in the top 100 anymore. Number 5, Wallenstein. I haven't played that one in a while. I need to go back to it. Number 4, Ticket to Ride. Still a fantastic classic. Number 3, Twilight Imperium 3rd Edition. It's a great experience. I just don't want to play games this long much anymore. Number 2, Cosmic Encounter. Look at that. Number 2 still. And number 1, Duel of Ages.
Oh, yeah.
Which I still have a lot of fond feelings for, but it has not aged well at all, unfortunately. Alrighty, folks. Well, that is our games here. So as we end the show here, we just had some final thoughts, and so I'm going to pass the microphone over to Eric.
Alrighty. Well, you know, I've mentioned before that I was a fan of the Dice Tower before I was involved in the Dice Tower. I was listening to the show with Joe, and then when Sam was on the show, and at some point I emailed Tom entering a contest, which I did not win, to say, hey, I'm a voice guy and I have a studio, and I wasn't working a whole ton because I had just left my radio job. So I was trying to get auditions and get work and stuff. So I had free time and offered to do some production work. And as Tom mentioned, he started having me do intros and top 10 clips and silly little gags and stuff. So I was just sort of studio guy. And when Sam left and Tom asked if I would be interested, I didn't think I'd be able to do this. I didn't think I played enough games. I didn't think I could fill Sam's shoes and actually be, one of the commentators on the show, talk about games every week. I don't think I could do that. And I was actually a little intimidated when I first met Sam because I thought he would be mad at me that I took his job. Turns out he was very, very nice. But I was a little worried the first time I met him in person. But being part of the Dice Tower has been literally life-changing for me over the past 15 years. I have gotten work, not just my, the best part-time job I've ever had. I've gotten gigs as the voice of apps, notably One Night, Ultimate Werewolf. I was also on the Crossroads game. I did something for Core Worlds. I've done Kickstarter videos for dozens of different publishers. I'm the voice of a radio station in Louisiana because someone from the Dice Tower was involved and wanted to bring me on there. I've gotten a few books because of my work in the Dice Tower. So that's been, for my career, has been an enhancement there. I've gotten to see areas of the world I never thought I'd be able to see. I've been able to go to Essen, to travel to different areas of the country, different conventions, events, different Dice Tower events, and other big conventions, done live shows in front of groups of people I never thought I'd be able to do. We mentioned the one on the cruise just this past week. I never thought I'd be doing an outdoor arena show on a cruise ship in front of everyone. People were like hanging out their balconies watching us do a game show. But most of all, I've met so many people folks that I would never have been able to interact with if I weren't involved in this program with this network. Tom, to begin with, but Mandy, Suzanne, Crystal, Geoff has become a great friend. My family and I have stayed at his house as we travel on cross-country trips before. Z, Sam, Mike, Roy, Chris, Rob Searing. I have to stop naming people because I know I'm going to forget people. Acquaintances all over the world. Folks that we only get to see when we head over to Essen or head over to one of the West Coast conventions. Getting to see people year after year and sort of build relationships with, and that would not happen. I may have gone to Gen Con once if I hadn't been involved with the Dice Tower, and that has been incredibly rewarding for me. So I just want to say thank you to everyone who has taken any amount of time to listen to the show, to come to us at a convention, to say hi, to come to one of our live shows. It is wonderful to get to do a live show at a convention and to be with the audience, doing games and silly stuff and just having the crowd with us to do these things, musical or not, and to sort of go along for the ride when we decide to do something really dumb. It's just been wonderful. So whether you are a listener from episode 1 or 100 or 749. Thank you for listening to the show, and I really, really appreciate it. And last but not least, thank you to Tom for taking the chance at having me on the show as a co-host. Because I know you also were a little worried about whether I was going to be able to do it, and at least you haven't said you were that disappointed yet. So I guess that's okay. No, I mean, I appreciate...
Now that it's been a decade, let me tell you.
I appreciate the trust that you placed in me as one of the helmsmen of the network, the fledgling network, and of the podcast, and it's been a wonderful ride, and I'm a little scared about what's coming up in the future because this podcast has been very familiar. It's something that I'm very comfortable producing as the weeks go by, and the future is a little bit more of an unknown, but it's also very exciting to be moving on to new things with the Under the Dice Tower banner.
I have a lot of people that I'm thankful for, and I am so sorry for the inevitable person that I've forgotten. I guess when you take the Oscar, I need to thank my family, and the kids at home need to go to bed and turn off TV right now. So first of all, thank you to Mark Johnson from a podcast called Board Games to Go, which still happens occasionally, who put the call out there and said, do a podcast. Anyone can do it. And I was like, I am anyone. And also I got a lot of ideas from listening to Dirk and Aldi back on the Board Game Geek Speak podcast. Geek Speak. Who still has, I love the Dice Tower theme, folks, but Geek Speak had the best theme for a podcast, I think. And Rick Thornquist, who ran Board Game News at the time, giving us some hosting space. It doesn't seem like a big thing now. Like, I'll host myself, thank you. But at the time, that was a really big deal, and he was very encouraging, said he liked the show. I didn't know how the show was going to be. I knew I liked to talk. I was like, I think people will like this. But I want to thank all the different sponsors we have over the year. Especially, I want to specifically call out Your Move Games because they sponsored us for a year. At the time, I was like, what? A year sponsorship? That was a big deal. They were a smaller company. And, I still remember the first time I dared to ask people maybe help us get some new microphones for the show. And some people sent money in, and I was like, people do that? That's amazing. But we had many sponsors, our most latest sponsor, the Op, and we have had Renegade. And then, of course, the three main game stores. I mean, Fun Again was there at the beginning,
they
really
were with us for a while,
when we first started. And then Cool Stuff, because Cool Stuff helped me with my Kickstarter fulfillment. Now we have a very nice relationship with Game Nerds. All great stores. And we had good relationships with all of them. Shout out to Joe. I was like, hey, Joe, You want to do a podcast? This thing? I explained what a podcast was.
What now?
It took him like 5 seconds. He was like, yes, let's do it. Figure out how to do it, Tom. So I wrote a script, and it was just great, and it was short. It seemed long, right? It seemed like we did a lot. We only did it for a year.
Yeah.
But he definitely left his mark. Joe left his mark on the show. And we definitely, that initial thing we had, nobody else had that. And that opening year with me and Joe has really set the trend of the Dice Tower. I never wanted the Dice Tower to be NPR. I mean, and don't get me wrong, I think NPR is a fine network.
Yeah, and I've been trying to get him in that direction this whole time, and he's pushed back.
No, but I wanted people to argue over games. I didn't want to be like, I like this game, and then a bunch of people go, tell me more. No, I wanted it to be a back and forth thing. And Joe, that was just natural to him. And we started that way, and it continued that way, and it's pervaded. But what it does is it makes the show, A, more interesting to listen to, and B, it allows you to hear various opinions on games. Small shout out to the unnamed top 10 guy. For the life of me, I cannot find the email.
He's just the guy.
Everyone still thinks it's Eric, and we have used him all the way up to the end.
It's not. It's not me.
Mike Fitzgerald. So earlier we talked about having Eric announce different things. Mike came in and was willing to do that. He was an early fan of the show. And he said, I used to be a DJ for radio. Also, I design board games, and I'm willing to do some of this voiceover work. And that blew my mind that he was willing to do that.
I was also nervous to meet Mike because I thought he'd be mad that I took his job.
And he was not, because Mike is one of the nicest guys in games.
He's incredibly nice, yes.
And then Joe left, and I was like, well, who can do that? So we had Sam on for a few episodes, and I was like, all right, Sam, you can carry this show. And I sat Sam down, and I was like, all right, but here's the change. Joe always insisted that everything was even Stevens, that we had 50%, anyone can veto anything. That makes no sense. Someone has to be the boss, so Sam, you're the sidekick here. I know it sounds over the top, but I was the one who was putting all the money into, all $100 at the time. I was buying a Dice Tower domain name and things like that. But Sam had to pick up after Joe, and Sam was not a war gamer versus Euro gamer, which, by the way, was what we initially were billed as.
Yep, Panzers and Pieces.
Yeah, I'm glad we didn't keep that name.
Me too.
But Sam did great, and it was really weird. I didn't know what to expect when, Sam left the show, moved back to America. I was in Korea at the time, and then I came back to America, and there was Sam, and I was like, well, I'm not getting rid of Eric. I actually had to call Eric and be like, Eric, you're fine, just to clarify.
I was a little nervous, yes.
But Sam got involved in the video side of things, and I was working for a company he really likes, Mythic Games. But I appreciate Sam and his willingness to he would take a shtick and run with it into the ground. And everyone, has his fans out there. People are still talking about him, and he's been off the show forever and a day. Shout out to Rob Searing for doing the website. Just emailed me out of nowhere and said, hey, would you like me to help put the website together? And I know that our website needs a lot of work, and it's actually under the process of being overhauled right now, as some very, very young, slick car salesman guy told me on the cruise. Some guy waltzed into the gaming room, Eric. He came up to me and he said, hey, are you running this thing? They told me to talk to you and not the short guy. I was like, oh, okay. And he was like, just like oozing slimy car salesman off him, right?
Really? So he just knew something big was happening, and he tried to sell you on website design.
I think so. He's like, I went to your website. It's so terrible. It's the worst. It's awful. I almost vomited. That type of thing. He's like, I can't help you, but I can connect you with people who do. That's what I do. I connect people.
Wow.
Which I really think it's like one of those lines. I'm like, did you watch that from a bad TV show? It was really funny. So he waltzed out to go give me his card. I never saw him again. I mean, it was less than a week ago, so maybe I will see him again, but I doubt it.
Mm-hmm.
Anyhow, Robert actually did a lot of work and still does work. He listens to every podcast and stuff and puts that stuff online. Tina for making us the best logos in the world. I love Tina's work. All the little dice people she makes have become an indelible part of the Dice Tower. And we've also had, and besides Tina, we've had many people who've made us logos and various things over the years, and I appreciate all that too. Again, I can't get everyone's name in here.
Yeah.
Let's see. Geoff, I want to do a shout out to Geoff Rodemaker for helping with the editing at one point, and Chris. A lot of people don't realize that Chris Yee takes these shows and puts them on the YouTube channel. I mean, he's the one doing it now. Roy and Chris were doing that earlier too, our other Chris. And we've had many different people over the years putting our show notes up on Board Game Geek and other places. And I appreciate that. That's little things like that really help. I shouldn't even say it's little.
Yeah.
Things like that really help. It's not just a little thing. Timothy Pinkham did the theme song for the Dice Tower. I mentioned earlier that Aldi had the best theme song, but we had someone write us an orchestral score. I don't know if you all realize that's a pretty big deal.
It is, and it's a full 3-minute piece of music.
It is. I think we played the whole piece of music at that last live show.
We did. When we first introduced it, we played the whole thing, and we used different bits and pieces of it, for when we did the award show.
I mean on the show we just did on the cruise.
Oh, we did.
Yeah,
we played the whole thing.
The whole piece played. That was pretty cool.
Yep.
Yeah, Timothy did a really good job doing that, and then, I don't know, maybe a year later gave me the little jazz version that we use in a lot of our YouTube videos.
Yep.
But I've just always liked that. It's so distinctive. That's our song. No one ever hears that and goes, that reminds me of something else. It doesn't.
Nope.
We have a lot of different temporary hosts. There was a few people. Ben is the one who comes to mind, who hosted in between Sam and Eric.
Yep.
When I was doing the thing that all the shows do, like the morning show did forever, where they have guest hosts while they're trying to figure out desperately what to do next. Want to say thank you to Moritz. Many people might not remember Moritz. Very, very famous composer at this point in Germany.
Yes.
Coming on. And we've had so many contributors, and I don't have time to thank all of them. I've already mentioned Geoff. Geoff did a great job, but we have had just various people come on and off. Some did one segment. Some did dozens.
Yep.
And I really appreciate that.
Yep.
Mandy and Suzanne, I want to thank them for coming on. Eric and I wanted to shake the show up, and I wanted to do something. And so I picked some of our best contributors to the Board Game Breakfast on the video side of things, and we asked them, and they were very, hesitant at the beginning, and I can understand why. There was a lot of, backlash, a lot of it just because change was happening.
Different, yeah.
And I told them at the very beginning to run their own voice, do their own show, don't copy ours. And they did. And I appreciate that they've done that. And if you haven't had a chance, go back and listen to the episode they just recorded, episode 749.
Yes, indeed. Mandy and Suzanne have taken the show in different directions. They've tried different things that we would never have thought of. And they play games that we weren't talking about, which is I often listen to their episodes and hear about stuff that I did not know existed. So I've hunted down games that Suzanne or Mandy are talking about, and it's been a delight to do shows with them and to get to hang out with them at conventions. They are wonderful board game siblings to have.
And it's tough here. I really have a hard time, coming to Eric. I have a hard time remembering what our first interaction was. I think it was something to do with the meeple sticks.
Oh, as far as what you asked me to do first? Yeah, I mean, it was that the contest, and I said, what do you want me to do? And you said, hey, can you do silly advertisements? And you would just throw out an idea like, let's do an advertisement for little wooden sticks that at the time were in every other game. They were just tons of games that had little painted wooden sticks. And so I wrote this silly thing about please don't stick them up your nose.
All right, I've done some quick searching here.
Yep.
So Eric's first email to me is, "Hi, Tom and Sam. I found the logo. It's on the reviewed page of the Ninja Galaxy website. Please let me into the contest. Thanks for the fantastic podcast. If you ever run into the need for an additional voiceover work, let me know." And then I said, "What kind of voiceovers?" And Eric said, "My primary business is industry narration, boring, dry corporate stuff."
Yep.
And then he sent me a demo, and I was like, "You sound good." I said, "I would gladly have you do spots for the show, but I'm sure I can't afford you right now."
Yep.
And Eric said, "I'll do it for free. I'm a proud listener of the show," he said. This was obviously before he knew much more about it.
I was very proud
and
of
then
the
you're
time.
right. I did something about having a fake sponsor of the show. That was our first interaction. That was pretty fast. And then you sent it to me. Now, when I asked you to be co-host, those emails are a little trickier to find.
Yeah, that's somewhere in the middle because we were already emailing back and forth. My favorite is that you would just have an idea and then you just leave it up to me to write the sketch. Like, let's do the Olympics, but with board games. And I'd be like, "Oh, okay. And I need it by Thursday." And I'd have to come up with board game sketch comedy and, fiddle around with music and sound effects and weird characters and all that. It was fun. A nice creative outlet when I was in the middle of doing all that corporate narration stuff, which I don't do nearly as much of anymore. But it was nice to do some silly board game production in between Six Sigma narration.
Yeah, it's interesting. I do remember those, and that was a big thing. And Eric was unusual for me as a choice for the podcast because I knew Joe really well. We were friends. I knew Sam. I only knew Eric through the thing. And for some reason, it just kept sticking in my head. He might be able to carry the whole show. So I just kind of decided, I think you can do it. And it worked really well. I record a lot of podcasts with people when I'm a guest on the podcast. And almost all of them, they do video nowadays.
Mm.
And we don't. And yet we almost never talk over each other.
We've gotten pretty good at learning each other's cadences, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. We know enough about each other and things like that. So, yeah, so Eric has been a fantastic, and I really appreciate that he's stuck through thick and thin. And that brings us to, well, before I get to what's in the future, of course, a big thank you to listeners. It's, man, last week at the cruise was really stressful, right? So many things to keep track of, so much stuff going on, and yet people come up to us and tell us how much they like the show.
Mm-hmm.
People come up to us. I remember the first time it happened to me at a convention, it blew my mind that someone listened to our show. Someone's like, "I recognize your voice." I mean, they say that to Eric more than me, but I really appreciate that and all that stuff. But I know, as this long email I just told you about told me how video is for the short attention span people. Here's the deal. Our Dice Tower video is being put up as an audio podcast. You can subscribe to this right now. You can just go to dicetoweraudio.com, or if you're in iTunes, look for DTV Audio. I'm not actually really happy with that name. I might change it at some point. But Wendy Yee is taking many of the things on our YouTube channel, top 10s, what I consider to be, quote unquote, the big videos, and putting them up there. So if you're looking for audio content, we put up something almost once a day about. That's like the average of something going up a day for you to download. That's not it. Actually, there's quite a bit of content because the amount of space I'm using for hosting purposes is quite hefty. It's a pretty expensive podcast to run, and we love if you listen to that. And then Eric and I have a show that we're still working on, realizing with Dice Tower West and things that could take a bit of time to get that together.
Yeah.
But when the first show of that is done, we will post it onto this feed here so that you can hear it. But then we'll probably start another feed for people to go listen and subscribe to that feed. I don't want to clog this one up and have people fooling around on that. Any other thoughts you want to talk about the new show, Eric?
Well, I mean, we mentioned it a few episodes ago, but it's going to focus on people. It's a chat show. We're going to try and find some folks in the board gaming sphere that we haven't had a chance to get to know very well, and we'll learn more about them. We'll have a discussion topic. We've got a few bouncing around that I'm looking forward to chatting out, and then maybe a little bit of new release talk, but not nearly as much as you've been hearing here on this show. This is about the people, and I'm looking forward to getting to know more of the people in the board gaming community.
So with that being said, I guess it's time to say goodbye. So what's going to happen is we'll start singing, and slowly we're going to each slip off.
Oh.
First me, and then we'll keep going till it's just Eric by himself. It's a really short song.
It's a very short.
I guess it doesn't work with two people.
Yeah, it's not real. No, we should probably just do our usual thing.
It's gone. But thank you. Thank you all for sticking around with us. Thank you for participating in the changes. Thank you to Cody and John for the idea of ending it strong. I've always planned to do that. I never knew when it's going to be. I always said 1,000. We're 250 too short, but that would have been like 5 years from now, so I'm okay with this. Thank you to everybody, especially those who hate our show, but still listen anyway. We appreciate it. To those of you who love the show and listen, we probably appreciate you even more. But until, well, no, you know what? Until the next show, I'm Tom Vassell.
I'm Eric Summerer.
And you've been listening to The Dice Tower.
Thanks for listening. Promotional consideration has been provided by game publishers in the form of review copies of games. This episode, number 750, was recorded on February 20th, 2022. Support for this podcast comes from listeners like you. Thank you for spreading the word. And speaking of support, the Jack Vassell Memorial Fund is dedicated to providing support to members of the board gaming community in their hour of need. Find out more about the fund's mission and how you can help at jackvassell.org. The Dice Tower has been produced by Tom, Mandy, Suzanne, and Eric, with production assistance from Roy Canaday, Mike Delisio, Chris Yee, and Rob Seary. Our theme was composed by Timothy Pinkham. The fact that our giant Spanish boat won't go anywhere without water provided by Arc Nova. And hosting is provided by Game Nerds, your all-in-one solution for all your nerdy needs at GameNerdsWithAZ.com. We're still listening online. Visit the Dice Tower Guild at BoardGameGeek.com. Email us at tom@Dicetower.com or eric@Dicetower.com, or follow us on Facebook. And of course, you can find more from the Dice Tower Network, including Board with Video Games, Meeple Overboard, Solosaurus, Sporadically Board, Flip Flory Super Saturday Board Game Serial, Board Game Design Lab, Tabletop Game Talk, Dukes of Dice, Board Games Insider, The D6 Generation, Solo BG, Ludology, Dice Tower Now, Board Game Blitz, The Portal Gaming Podcast, The Family Gamers, Board Gamers Anonymous, The Broken Meeple, The Game Pit, Rolling Dice and Taking Names, All the Bits, This Game is Broken, Blue Peg, Pink Peg, The Secret Cabal Gaming Podcast, and Dice Tower Tonight at DicetowerNetwork.com. Until we meet again, from all the gang at the Dice Tower, have fun gaming.
Is this where I come in for my segment?
Really? I thought Skip would end us, but that's fine.
I was told I'd get to come back at some point.
Honestly, I thought you were dead.
Oh, I probably am.